It's 2014, and in a small storefront in Chicago's Logan Square, four friends are about to change the game forever. No fancy investors, no trust funds, no safety nets, just raw talent, unwavering determination, and a shared dream that would seem crazy to most people: to put Chicago streetwear on the map. I know brand owners out here have real problems, like you may want a core audience, but you just don't know how to build one. Another problem that stems from this issue is not knowing how to find the right people for your brand. Or people do follow, but they don't ride with you. They're not tapped in. They're just scrolling through their feed, and I know how frustrating that can be. This is why I feel the need to share this story. This guy from Chicago did not focus on followers. He built a real community. They called their store Fat Tiger Workshop, but what happened inside those walls will become legendary. While New York and LA dominated the fashion headlines, these four creators were quietly building something revolutionary, a movement that would eventually catch the attention of Nike, Adidas, and even the White House. At the center of it all, a kid from Chicago's West Side who started by selling t-shirts under the counter at other people's stores. I know that sounds crazy, but within just a few years, his collabs would generate long lines in cities across the world. And it started in this simple shop where the only currency that mattered was creativity. But to understand how Fat Tiger Workshop came to be, we need to go back to another legendary spot in Chicago streetwear scene, a place called Leaders 1354. This was Chicago in the mid-2000s. Ask anyone who was trying to make it in the city's creative scene back then, and they'd tell you, Leaders wasn't just a store. This was 2006. Behind the counter, you'd find two young guys who were about to change everything: Joe Freshgoods and Terrell Jones. They weren't even supposed to be there, really. They started as interns, sweeping and stocking shelves, but the store owner, Corey, saw something in them. He had the philosophy that a streetwear store should be more than just a place to buy clothes. A streetwear store is supposed to be a movement, to my understanding. It's supposed to be a community hub where like-minded people can connect on a lifestyle and build relationships with each other. The clothes are secondary. But on any given day from this streetwear store, Leaders, you might walk in and find an up-and-coming rapper doing an improv performance. Like, for example, Chance the Rapper, before he was Chance, just chilling. The energy in that place was different. The rules were different. The vision you have of a store was different. It wasn't like walking into some stuck-up boutique where the staff looked down at you. At Leaders, the personalities behind the counter were as much of a draw as the clothes on the racks. And this is where our story really begins, because it's at Leaders that Joe and Rello, who was already making a name for himself in Chicago's fashion scene, and later they connect with Daz Owusu, whose fresh perspective on design will complete the puzzle. But at the time, none of them knew they were laying the groundwork for what would become Fat Tiger Workshop. They were just four guys who shared the same crazy dream, connecting, talking, and sharing their perspectives on how to put their own spin on Chicago streetwear. Most people would have been content working at the hottest streetwear store in Chicago, but Joe, he was already thinking 10 steps ahead. While he was supposed to be just selling other clothes that was available inside the shop, he had this little side hustle going in. I'm not even saying you should do this, but just imagine it. You walk into Leaders looking for whatever's hot that week, and Joe pulls up on you with this wild t-shirt from his book bag. I'm talking about celebrity mugshots, controversial statements about cultural icons, stuff that will probably get you canceled today inside this world. But the main jewel you should take away from this is people weren't just buying the shirts with another person's mugshot on it. They were buying into Joe's entire ethos. He wasn't trying to copy Supreme or Stussy. His identity is built on commenting on cultural and societal issues. I'm pretty sure when he started out, it was mostly on cultural issues located in Chirac, but he eventually expanded into different regions as the brand grew. These mugshot t-shirts created conversations about celebrity culture and the justice system, which align with the brand. These pieces made people feel like they were part of something bigger. And of course, sometimes he get in trouble for selling his own stuff at work, but that was just a part of the hustle. That's when Vic Lloyd enters the picture. Now you've got to understand who Vic was in Chicago streetwear scene. This wasn't just some guy who knew about fashion. Vic was like this foreseer of Chicago streetwear, the guy who could spot talent from a mile away. And what you saw what Joe and Rello was doing, he knew they had something special. While Joe was building what would become Don't Be Mad, which is DBM, though back then it was called Dope Boy Magic, Rello was cooking up something of his own. His brand Vita was starting to make noise, especially with this collection called Chicago Over Everything. If you've ever been to Chicago, you've probably seen knockoffs of it all over the city. I mean, that's how you know someone's really made it, right? But then Joe got hit with this lawsuit from a brand called Dope Couture about the name Dope Boy Magic. Instead of seeing this as chaotic and a problem, Joe flipped it completely. He changed the name to Don't Be Mad, DBM for short. It's like he's saying to the other brand, oh, you mad? Don't be. That's the kind of wit that would become his trademark. Meanwhile, Dez was doing his own thing with the squad line. This guy was taking the Nike logo, yeah, this on the screen right here, and flipping it in ways that had people doing double takes. It was bold, fresh, and it was exactly what they needed to complete the puzzle. You've got to remember, this was all happening in Chicago, not New York or Cali. These guys were building something from the ground up with no blueprint to follow. This is the foundation and grassroots that made each one of them get notoriety and buzz inside their community. But even outside of this, they had this shared vision of creating more than just another clothing store. They wanted to build a space where creativity could thrive, where the next generation of designers and artists could feel at home, where they can come up with ideals and paint their vision of what their era should be. Real quick, if you're a brand owner with a solid product but your engagement's been quiet between drops, during drops, or even after, we've been building something behind the scenes that's made to help. I'm opening a private engagement service for brands that want real momentum, more eyes on your page, more comments from people who actually care. No shortcuts, just real traffic built the right way with the right people finding you for the right reasons. We're only accepting 4 brands per quarter, so if you're serious about keeping your brand in motion throughout the year, tap the link in the description and apply now. This is the understanding you should have if you want to get people to buy into your brand. As Joe would later put it, they wanted it to feel like a barbershop. You know, one of those spots where you might come in for a haircut, but you just stay for the conversation, where the personalities behind the counter are as much of a draw as whatever's on the shelves. A place where you could walk in as a customer and walk out as part of the family. In his own words, he said, the clothes are like bait. You're coming in to see the people that work behind the register. You know how they say, it ain't just about who's on the team, it's how y'all move together. That's exactly what was happening with Fat Tiger Workshop. These 4 guys weren't just throwing their brands together under one roof. They were creating something the city of Chicago had never seen before. So let's break this down real quick. Joe, this guy could sell ice to an Eskimo, but in the best way possible. He had this gift for taking whatever was happening in the culture and turning it into something you wanted to wear. To break it down in the most simplest terms, he was just telling the stories of each piece. I mean, every piece had a meaning, a conversation behind it, the thing that people call marketing. The way he could create buzz around a release was almost supernatural. He understood something fundamental. People don't just buy clothes. They buy into stories, into moments, and into feelings. Then you got Rello. If Chicago had a heartbeat, this guy could hear it. He knew every corner, every neighborhood, more importantly, every subculture. When people wore his stuff, it wasn't just repping Chicago. They were wearing a piece of the city's soul. Vic, he was like the wise elder of the group, but not in that boring, out of touch type of way. This man has seen it all in the streetwear game. He knew what worked, what didn't, and most importantly, why. When he spoke, everybody listened. Not because he was the loudest voice inside the room, though, but because his track record spoke for itself. And Dez, he was like the breath of fresh air, while everyone else was playing it safe. Like what I said, he was out there taking the Nike logo and flipping it into ways that had people heads turning and spinning. He himself, what he brought was a fearless energy that balanced out the whole operation perfectly. You need that wild card sometimes. But here's what made Fat Tiger different from every other streetwear shop popping up inside Chicago. They wasn't trying to be the next Supreme. They weren't even trying to copy what was hot in New York or LA. In fact, they were doing the exact opposite. Their whole vision was like, hey, Chicago's got its own thing going on. We don't need to copy anybody. And in a space where everybody's looking for shortcuts, these guys was taking the long road on purpose. No trust fund kids backing them up. No sketchy money that's under the table. No rich uncles writing checks. Most brands you see blowing up, they got others backing them, but this one was all about their community. But Fat Tiger, this was all built on pure hustle. From long nights, empty bank accounts, and that kind of energy that comes from developing relationships one step at a time. I mean, talking to people inside your DM, replying back to people who commented on your posts, going out to events specifically where your community is, and meeting them in person. Not to mention trying to solve problems that your community has. have. And I don't mean solving it with a garment. This can be applied to any type of business that wants to develop awareness and wants to have a loyal group of people that will rock with you no matter what. Which means you have to do a lot of giving. This is what makes most brands successful today in the year 2025. Joe would later tell Complex, "No one here has rich parents. Ain't no drug money propping us up. This is all here because of hard work." And you know what's crazy? That's exactly what made people respect him even more. In an industry where everything can feel fake, from the product to the marketing and lifestyle, Fat Tiger was keeping it real. They were proving that you could build something authentic and successful without compromising who you are or where you're from. Now, while Fat Tiger was becoming the talk of Chicago streetwear scene, something else was cooking up. Joe Freshgoods wasn't just a store owner. He was building his own empire, piece by piece. And to really understand how he did it, the hallways of Lane Tech High School on Chicago's north side is a good spot to pinpoint. Joe was not born into fashion. He wasn't that kid with the fancy clothes or the latest drops. Instead, he was the kid who figured out how to flip what he had into something nobody else was wearing. One day, he got this idea. Why not have his homegirl sew some bandanas on his jeans? Simple, right? But when he walked into school wearing them, something crazy happened. Everybody went crazy. He later would tell Black Enterprise, "I realized that people liked something I had only thought of a few days before." That's when a light bulb went off. Joe realized he didn't need a fashion degree or industry connections. He just needed ideals that could get people talking. And that's the info I want you guys to take from this. Whenever you're creating your drops or you're creating a piece, find a story that you could pull from your own experience and just make it relatable and find a way to get people to actually talk about that piece. But fast forward to 2009 and Joe drops his t-shirt that says "Money and clothes and cars and." It might not sound revolutionary, but the way he marketed it, the way he got it into people's hands, it was like watching a masterclass in grassroots brand building. The shirt went Tumblr crazy, as Joe puts it, and suddenly he started making $60 every 2 minutes. But it was 2012 when things really took off. Joe creates this beanie that says, "I want to smash Rihanna." You know that's not what he said, but you could put two and two together. Bold was an understatement. The thing goes viral. It gets bootlegged everywhere, and the next thing you know, Rihanna's legal team is sending him a cease and desist letter. Joe, on the other hand, he saw it as free publicity. Again, the thing about this dude is creating ideals that get people talking. I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but the beanie became legendary in streetwear circles, and suddenly people outside of Chicago were asking, "Who is this Joe Freshgoods guy?" All these guys have an amazing way to get the conversation started. In a way as well, it leads to the product selling itself, which is key. But here's where Joe was different from most designers who get a taste of viral fame. He didn't chase it. Instead, he developed a system he called his chamber approach. Think of it like a revolver. He never pulled the trigger on one ideal until he had two more loaded up and ready to go, because every piece he dropped was a conversational starter. Sometimes it was social commentary, sometimes it was pop culture reference like what we saw with Rihanna, and then sometimes it was an inside joke that only Chicago folks will get, which was aimed for the core. But it was always authentically Joe. Working out of Fat Tiger gave him the perfect lab to experiment with different approaches to retail and marketing. He developed a unique pop-up model, creating exclusive experiences that generated buzz and built real, genuine community. Through Fat Tiger, Joe was able to refine his understanding of his core audience. He realized that while other brands were chasing hype beasts and high-end consumers, there was a huge untapped market of regular people who appreciated authentic, thoughtful design. This insight would later inform his approach to collaborations and help him maintain his independence, even as his brand grew in prominence. And most important, this period at Fat Tiger also helped Joe develop his storytelling abilities. And this is a huge tribute that I believe you need to have if you want people to really believe and rock with your brand values. The story has to be on point. He learned to create narratives around his collections that went beyond just the clothes themselves. Whether it was drawing inspiration from Chicago's neighborhoods, cultural moments, or even his own personal experiences, each release became a chapter in a larger story about community, creativity, originality, or you can even say authenticity is the key word here. Fat Tiger was the masterclass of it. There, Joe was able to refine his understanding of his core audience. He realized that while other brands were chasing mainstream consumers, there was a huge untapped market of regular people who appreciated a unique approach, guys. The center of it all was Joe Freshgoods, who come a long way from selling t-shirts out of his backpack at Leaders to now where he was the guy whose drops would have people camping out in Chicago weather. The same dude who used to secretly sell his shirts under the counter was now the one everyone was watching. But even with that, success didn't change him, guys. While other designers who blew up would pack their bags for New York or LA, Joe just straight doubled down on Chicago. He kept his production local, his prices accessible, and his message authentic. A quote that he said was, "I'm an example of staying true to my city, staying home and keeping it organic." And people noticed that. Not just the customers who lined up for hours outside of the shop, but the kids from the neighborhood who saw that you can make it big without leaving your hometown and your home city. The local artists who got their first break doing pop-ups at his store. The up-and-coming designers who learned the game through Fat Tiger's workshops. This dude built blueprint for a whole new generation of Chicago creatives, and I think that's powerful in itself. And I know you guys that's watching this can also do the same thing. This wasn't just another streetwear success story that I'm trying to make you guys understand. This was proof that if you stay true to your vision, your community, and most importantly yourself, you could change the game without playing by anyone else's rules. I think that's the best way to do it, and it's gonna bring more peace to you and your loved ones in the future as well. And now, remember that kid who was sewing bandanas on his jeans in high school? Well, by the 2020s, he was about to become one of the most influential voices in streetwear. But the path from Fat Tiger to global recognition, that's the interesting part. While other brands was fighting over who could charge the most for a t-shirt, he was focused on what he calls that regular guy or gal shirt. He knew that there were way more regular people in the world than there were folks willing to drop $1,000 on a t-shirt. And when it came to collaborations, while his inbox was probably flooding with offers, he was turning down deals. Remember, if you have your brand strategy, you know your values, you know what will be a good collaboration for you and your community, and you know what will be a terrible one. I mean, one time a major brand offered him big money to be their creative director. First slot of their pitch deck was a black fist. Joe walked away. That money could have changed his life, but he wasn't about to compromise his vision. Then New Balance came knocking on the door in 2022. The sneaker industry was going through this moment where every brand was trying to jump on social causes, often in ways that felt forced or just superficial. But when New Balance approached Joe about their Conversations Amongst Us campaign, something just was different. Joe saw an opportunity to tell a real story about the black experience, not just during Black History Month, but as an ongoing conversation. You could also see there's a pattern here. Brands came to him because his identity was tight, it was cohesive, and it lasted for years. It was legit. It wasn't something he thought about after the fact. Then he stepped in as a creative director for the entire campaign, making sure every aspect of it felt authentic. Like the vintage inspired sweatshirts, tees, and joggers that spoke to the culture. The 2002 R574s, 550s were pieces of a larger narrative about community and connection. He made sure the impact went beyond the products. He brought New Balances together with Community Goods, an organization that opened doors for students from underserved communities to explore art and creativity. Again, he did this to help his community, and at the end of the day, if you guys can apply this to your own personal brands or to your own brands, then you will win. Trust me. It might not be instant, but let's just say if you keep applying it, you'll see the results. People will rock with you. He also made a $100,000 donation, and it wasn't just a check. It was an investment in the next generation of creators, funding mentorships, community events, and internship opportunities. Because when Joe said, "I want to refrain from saying Black History Month because it's not about that," he meant it. This wasn't a one-off campaign or a seasonal celebration. It was about creating lasting change in the industry, about showing that collaborations could be more than just marketing moves. It could be vehicles for real community impact. And now if you look at it, the collaborations just kept getting bigger and more meaningful. McDonald's, that's the mixed campaign. Nike, Adidas, shit, even the Chicago Bears, which is an NFL team. Even the White House, now that I think about it, Thank You Obama collection that dropped right as Obama was leaving office. But get this, Joe never lost sight of who he was making clothes for. It was about the everyday people who made his brand what it was. The impact, it went way beyond clothing. Joe had created a whole new blueprint for success in the fashion industry. He showed that you didn't need to leave your city to make it big. You didn't need rich parents or outside investors. You just needed to stay true to your vision and your community. From selling t-shirts under the counters at Leaders to having his designs worn at the Grammys and even at the NBA All-Star Game, Joe Freshgoods proved that you can change the game without leaving home. More importantly, he showed that when you build something authentic, the world will come to you. Alright, y'all, this is Lee from North Studios. I hope you all strive inside your streetwear business. I really, truly believe that. Till next time, I'm out of here. Peace.